I don't want you to have a heart attack or suddenly start believing in unicorns, because what I'm about to show you is akin to seeing unicorns. But I assure you, first of all, what I'm about to show you is real. It is in no way, shape, or form a parody. What I'm about to show you are clips of MSNBC, CNBC, and CNN all reporting real, accurate news, reporting good news, news that's favorable to our duly elected and beloved President Donald John Trump, and they're happy to report it. You don't see this very often. Don't get a heart attack. This is real.
And we've got breaking news, my favorite kind, economic news. Just in, first quarter GDP numbers have just been released, showing 3.2% growth for the first quarter. That is a beautiful number, better than estimates, a strong start to the fiscal year.
Really big numbers.
This is a pretty darn good number.
I do think this was a very solid number.
Much stronger than expected growth.
Our economy is now the hottest anywhere on the planet Earth. Just this morning, we learned that the GDP smashed expectations, with the economy growing at an annual rate of 3.2% in the first quarter. Always the worst quarter for whatever reason.
Our success for the past 2 years is a result of reducing the government's footprint in the free market. So, Mr. Secretary, are you a capitalist or a socialist?
I am a capitalist.
That's great. And what effect would it have on GDP and the U.S. economy if we begin to turn away from free market principles and take a more socialist approach?
I think it would be disastrous for the economy, and every single country that's pursued those economic goals has deteriorated significantly.
Generally, economic news isn't very exciting. I'm going to make it very exciting for you this evening, because I'm going to show you how the policies of our president, Donald Trump, is doing so many things on so many levels and is being reflected in this 3.2% GDP growth in the first quarter of 2019. What's really happening behind the scenes is a huge checkmate against China, against the global banking robber barons, and continued freedom and national security for we, the American citizens. This is one of the biggest underreported and misunderstood wins of the Make America Great mission of our president. I'm going to break it down for you and simplify it. By the end of this video, you too will be seeing how great this economic news really is when you understand all the underlying things that have led to it. So with that, let's get this party started.
This is BCP Juniorette. Welcome to our Patriot family. Please like, share, subscribe, and press the notification bell so you can stay up to date.
Welcome to the Weekend Report. I am your host, BCP. If this is your first time here, if you like this video, go ahead and smash the like button. You might have to do it a couple times. It's kind of sticky when it comes to conservative channels on this platform, but your persistence is greatly appreciated. If you like the content overall and you haven't joined our family, go ahead and subscribe. YouTube calls you subscribers, but I call you my brothers and sisters, because I don't care what you look like. I don't care which of the two genders you are. But if you bleed red, white, and blue, then you've come to the right place. You're now part of the family. Welcome. The adoption papers are final. Now, I know I probably lost some of you in the introduction because, let's face it, economic news isn't generally very exciting. But what we're seeing here with this 3.2% annual GDP growth in just the first quarter of 2019 is a result of a great story that's happening behind the scenes. Now, I'm going to support everything I say with facts and figures and clips and evidence. If you want access to all of this, make sure you go to bcpextras.com and you can watch all of my sources and see my sources for yourself. What I want to do here in this part is just give you an overview for those of you that don't have the patience to sit through all of this. China has been taking advantage of the United States for years. We can thank the Clintons, even though it was President Bill Clinton who was president. That couple was very keen in selling us out to China. The subsequent presidents have been about the same, turning a blind eye to China ripping us off, not just in just trade, but also our intellectual property, etc. And one of the ways that they've been taking advantage of not just the United States, but the whole Western global banking system is through the World Bank. Now, what the World Bank does is has a mission to help eradicate or lessen the poverty worldwide.
The World Bank, the international finance agency, which provides loans to countries all around the world.
What the last World Bank president, usually the World Bank president is nominated. The president is nominated by the President of the United States and has traditionally been an American, whereas the International Monetary Fund is generally a European, who is the president of that. The last president was very cozy in helping China build themselves with getting low interest loans from the World Bank. What happens is that the country of China is communist, and it's the Central Party, the Central Communist Party, that has been using these low interest rate loans and have been using world money, if you will, to invest in their infrastructure and in other projects that the ruling Communist Party deems that the money should be used. And so China has pretty much taken advantage of us in the World Bank system. That was Obama's appointee. That's kind of how he was. Well, President Trump nominated David Malpass, and I've reported on this in the past. There will be links at the end of this video to those videos.
President Trump announcing a brand new head of the World Bank. From the Roosevelt Room of the White House, the Treasury Department's David Malpass is the president's choice to lead.
What the president did was nominate me as the U.S. candidate for it. And so I'll be meeting with other shareholders talking about the goals of the World Bank. And so that's the process we'll go through. And then
you got to get confirmed.
If I'm selected by the shareholders of the World Bank, then I would become president. And what we can do, I think, is focus the mission, have a core mission that really is to see countries doing better, countries growing, raising their median income, and that comes back to the U.S. That's good for us. It helps in terms of stability, in terms of peace, if countries can be doing better.
But on April 9th, David Malpass actually became the World Bank president, even though there was a lot of opposition. In the end, all of the other banks went ahead and voted him in. And he is very, very capitalist and does not want to allow and will not allow China, and is actually already weaning China off of this free, and I say free, but essentially very low interest rate loans to build their country, build their economy at the expense of the United States through trade imbalances.
3 days on the job as the World Bank president and his first ever interview here as the World Bank president. Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here, enthusiastic about the job.
How many big changes are we going to see at the World Bank under your leadership?
I talked with President Xi of China, and everyone's, very interested in that role. He was supportive of the idea that the World Bank has a clear mission, that our relationship with China is evolving.
So does that mean you're not looking at the World Bank as a tool to further undermine or at least confront China, as the Trump administration has been doing?
So there are challenges facing the world in terms of how do you have transparent projects that are high quality, where the debt is transparent. China moved so fast.
One of the things we've heard you talk about before, though, is less lending to China, as it doesn't need it as much as some of the other countries. Is that something you're going to put to work?
Yes, and that's embedded in the capital increase. So China recognizes that its role as a borrower in the bank needs to diminish substantially. So that's been going on in the lending programs, and I expect it to go on pretty rapidly over the next three or so years. As the programs are reduced, we can find things to work together as we wind down the borrowing relationship.
Now, with David Malpass in there, that is a great move to lessen the effects of Chinese Communist Party taking advantage of the World Bank. But there's something else that's happening here. See, the Federal Reserve here in this country, and you can watch other videos, and I've made other videos about the truth about the Federal Reserve. It's not federal, and they don't even have reserves. Okay, the Federal Reserve, of course, is a coalition of private banks that are in charge of our currency and our policies, and I'm not going to go into that in this video. But we have seen that at the end of last year, our markets kind of took a little bit of a hit because the Fed started raising rates. Well, President Trump, unlike other presidents, was very vociferous, loud, and very strong on the fact that the Fed, who had been keeping the rates essentially at zero for Obama, and there was still very little growth. There was some growth, but 1% growth was supposed to be the new norm. Well, the interest rates were raised a little bit.
And we have interest rates going up at a clip that's much faster than certainly a lot of people, including myself, would have anticipated. I think the Fed is out of control. I think what they're doing is wrong. We are doing great as a country. Unfortunately, they just raised interest rates a little bit because we are doing so well. I'm not happy about that because I know it's going to be a question. I am not happy about that.
And we still got this 3.2% growth the first quarter of 2019. Generally, we're not supposed to have that kind of growth of the first quarter because, and I'll show you some clips here, but I guess some of these people get this wrong. And for those of you who are new here and not aware, IBCP, I have a degree in economics, and I've been working in finance since the age of 21 when I started working at Bank of America, and until my most recent thing, I was a vice president at an FDIC insured federal bank. So I know banking, and I know lending, and I know how this stuff works. So what happens is the Fed has signaled and has done this where they're keeping the interest rates low. And that has been great for our economy.
The GDP numbers were just announced, and they were far higher than even the high expectations. There were many people thought it would be less than 2, and there were 3.2.
Now there's pros and cons to low interest rates for us investors and us savers. Not very favorable, right? It's harder to earn money. But the second thing that's been happening is that we've had very low inflation.
Inflation numbers are very low. The gasoline prices are coming down.
And President Trump is, even though we do have deficit, him and his administration are very keen and very focused on lowering federal spending.
I'd rather pay down debt or do other things, create more jobs.
Now, another checkmate that's happening, maybe checkmate's a little bit of hyperbole, but another thing that's happening is that this is not very good for the global banking families. There's one family in particular that everyone knows their name. They are the Red coat of arms family. And they, even though they had a good 2018, they're not very optimistic about 2019.
We are going to talk about the Rothschilds and some recent news. Benjamin, the family to take its Swiss bank private. This one caught me by surprise. You don't often see many companies like this going back into being private.
What happens is when we have this environment where we have strong GDP growth, we have relatively low interest rates and low inflation. Why is all this happening? Because Trump has made America great again. We have increased our manufacturing. We have increased our output. But here's one thing that's really great, is that because of what we're doing with China, and we're trying to correct the trade imbalances, and with other countries as well, and because NAFTA has pretty much been eliminated and we have this new agreement with Canada and Mexico, people are no longer taking advantage of us. It's not 100% fixed, but we're definitely on the road to that. And so that makes our country more wealthy because there's more even trade, and there's more intra-trade, if you will, between states and amongst us here in the United States. And that is very important for national security, that we are not dependent on what's happening on the world economy and the global economy. That is good for America, but very, very bad for the globalist banking elites and the shenanigans that they often play with currencies, interest rates, etc. Now, that is why some of these families and bankers are very pessimistic about 2019.
With the outlook for the 2019 remaining cautious, is that profitability has been squeezed and shows little sign of recovering in this low rate environment. So they want to get away from being a public company because of what they believe the future has in store. What does that tell you when a company like this isn't able to do business the way they were previously? That, to me, tells you a lot.
Now, to prove that the economic policies of President Trump are sound, and we're talking about the lowering of regulations, the lowering of taxes, putting the squeeze on the Fed not to raise interest rates, is the fact that even though we have very strong growth, Europe, China, and the rest of the world aren't experiencing what we are experiencing.
My guess is it's the rest of the world which is more worrisome right now than the United States, Europe, for example.
Peace and prosperity. There's no president, Democratic or Republican, who would not want to be able to say that the U.S. is not at. We're, in fact, withdrawing from some battlegrounds, and the economy is strong and the unemployment rate is low. So this is an economy that any president of any party would envy. And the question is, can President Trump maintain it? If he can keep economic growth going at 2.5%, maybe nearly 3%. And by the way, I remind you, it was just about 6 weeks ago, folks on this show came on and warned the economy was skidding to a halt and possibly we were going to have a recession. And now, where are we? 2.5%, 3% growth. If President Trump keeps that going, he's going right back into the White House in 2 years.
That is what's happening here, folks. We are strengthening our economy. We are lessening our dependence on other countries for energy, for manufacturing, and for goods and services that we can produce, and I'm saying we as Americans can produce and consume, strengthening our economy and once again shielding us from what's happening in the rest of the world. Not completely, mind you, but to such an extent that we are having phenomenal growth while the rest of the world is not. Listen to me. Read my lips. We are doing great in spite of what's happening in the rest of the world. That is great for national security, and when I'm talking about that, the national security of our country. It's be harder for the global banksters, for these fraudsters, to wreak havoc and force a depression or recession on our country. Now, it's not foolproof, but we are a lot more inoculated against it than we otherwise would be. So that's kind of the lesson that I want you to have here. I know people's eyes glaze over when we talk about economics and finance. It's not everyone's bag. I get that. But this is one of the huge wins of President Trump.
But in political terms, for the president, the good news here isn't just that top line number, which is pretty strong. There's a number inside the report that actually may be more significant in the long run for the president and his political prospects heading toward 2020 re-election. Some of that nice growth number came from businesses building up inventories and state and local governments spending more heavily than before. And consumer spending wasn't really all that hot, but still overall a pretty good number. But inside those numbers, there's one hidden number that may be a good sign for the president on that front as well, on the longer-term prospects for his economic report to the nation. That number is the inflation number within the first quarter report. Inflation was very low.
And this is a huge win, my fellow patriots, that we are seeing because of President Trump and his policies. And the globalists, bankers, and the elites, they hate it because America has been one big fat teat for them for eons, and that supply is getting cut off because, once again, I'm not saying we're a bubble, but we're starting to build that MAGA protection, if you will, over our economy by being able to produce and consume within our country, also stop these or lessen these trade imbalances once again so that these countries like China don't get rich off of us.
It's a little too early to know whether this is going to affect the feelings that voters have heading into the 2020 election. We're probably a year or so out from when those kind of feelings start to coalesce and you get some sense of what the average voter's view of the economy is going to be in a re-election year.
There you have it, folks. While the world was focused on the Mueller report, which was important, and all these new revelations about what the deep state has been doing, has done, and all those things have come to light, well, all that has been the headline news. Under the radar, President Trump and his economic team, with Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, and also David Malpass in the World Bank, have been moving forward a MAGA agenda which protects us from China, building their country, their communist country, by having their government control infrastructure using very low interest rate World Bank money. He has kept the Barron banker families in check with low inflation and low interest rates their ability to rob us blind has been sorely hindered. And of course, him taking it to the Federal Reserve System and being tough on them, once again, the Federal Reserve System that's neither federal nor has the reserves they're supposed to have, he's putting a check on their power to destroy our economy. All that while he's dealing with a negative Marxist globalist press and Marxists in our own government in the form of the Democrat Party and uniparty rhinos that are trying to stop him at every turn. And yet he is completely winning on so many fronts. Thanks for being here, my fellow patriots. God bless you. God bless this great republic known as the United States of America. And God bless our duly elected president, Donald John Trump, who is winning, 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 not for himself, but for we, the people.
And if you're President Trump and you have been complaining that the Fed raising interest rates too far, too fast has been the biggest threat to economic growth, well, the fact that this report suggests the Fed will keep the brakes on interest rate increases is really a very good sign now and heading into 2020.
Thanks for joining us on the Black Conservative Patriot channel. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notifications bell so you don't miss a thing.